As you probably already know, there are so many different cameras out there, and it was really tough for me to try to finalize on what I wanted, but after spending tons of time trying to figure out the best camera for myself, I ended up just going with the Sony A7IV for a couple of different reasons. In this video, I'm going to help any of you who may be wondering if the Sony A7IV would be a good option for yourself, and what I believe are the best cameras depending on your own experience. If you're a beginner that's barely even held a camera, or if you have some experience already and you're looking to upgrade, then make sure to listen up because we have got a lot to learn in this video. Now, I want to make it clear that I am not a camera expert, but I have been using them for probably just over 4 years now, since I started creating content on Instagram and YouTube back in 2018. Over the years, I learned a bunch about videography and photography, but there is still a lot for me to learn, so I just want to share my experience so far. Now, my first real camera that I could call my own was the Sony A6400, which I picked up for a little under $1,000 about 4 years ago. My main reason for buying this camera was for better looking content here on YouTube and Instagram as well, and back then I was just using my iPhone to film all of my videos. And as a beginner, I kind of just wanted the A6400 because I knew some people on YouTube had recommended it. I knew it could film in 4K, it could take decent pictures, and it really just did everything that I needed it to at the time. I actually kept using this camera up until the last few months or so when I decided it was time to go to the next level so that my content could be even better. And that's when I started doing a ton of research on the different types of Sony cameras, why some of them are so much more expensive than others, and why there's so many different options. It's very important to know that with Sony, some of their cameras have a focus on videography like the FX3, some are focused on photography like the A9 II, and there are some hybrid cameras, also known as general purpose cameras, that are meant for both, kind of like the Sony A7IV. If you are wanting to do photography and videography on the same camera, then I think it is an absolute must to get a hybrid camera so that you can take great photos and videos within just one camera without having to buy two separate ones. Of course, it definitely depends on what you will end up using your camera for, and I know for myself, I mainly use my camera for filming videos here on YouTube, but also sometimes I need to take some photos as well, so a general purpose camera was something that I really needed. Going with a hybrid camera has saved me tons of money because I haven't needed to go out of my way and buy two different cameras, one with photography and one that does videography, and instead I just bought the Sony A7IV, which is still pricey but totally worth it for my business. And by the way, for those of you guys wondering, the Sony A7IV is currently $2,298 at the time I'm filming this video. Now, I want to help you guys figure out the best Sony camera for you, so let's go ahead and talk about some of the different models and what they do. By the way, feel free to do some research on Canon and Nikon as well, but I am personally most familiar with Sony's E-mount cameras, so that's what this video will focus on. You can see here on the screen I labeled all of the newest Sony E-mount cameras for you guys so that you can see just how many Sony has. On the left side, I labeled some of their general purpose cameras that are good for both photos and videos. In the middle, the cameras meant for video, and on the right here, these are the best for sports and wildlife photography. Now, it is very important to know the difference between an APS-C camera and a full-frame camera. These are just the names of the two different camera sensors that have a different size. For example, an APS-C camera, which stands for Advanced Photo System Type C, has a smaller internal sensor, which means the cameras are typically more compact, lighter, and even more affordable than full-frame cameras. Because of the smaller sensor, low-light photos and videos are not going to be quite as crisp, and they will be more noisy. And full-frame cameras, on the other hand, are typically much more expensive, usually about double the price when it comes to the camera body and different lenses. They perform better in low-light conditions thanks to the larger sensor, and they usually have a larger body that's a bit heavier. Most videographers and photographers that consider themselves as pro users have a full-frame camera, and this is because of the better low-light performance, and it can produce a more narrow depth of field that gives us this slightly more blurry background that looks a bit more cinematic. Of course, make sure to remember that the aperture in your camera lens will affect how blurry the background is the most, but with my Sony A7IV, I've been able to create lots of content in dark settings without the footage getting noisy so full frame is definitely better in terms of indoor studio settings, especially if it's a bit dark. If you are wanting a camera that can do it all, I highly recommend going for a full frame camera, but if you're just getting started, an APS-C will do the job. Think about the specific places and areas you will be doing your photos or videos, and from there you can make your decision on whether or not you need a full frame camera or an APS-C. For example, if you're just a beginner and you want better looking footage than your smartphone, and you're going to be filming or taking photos in brighter settings, then an APS-C camera will be a great option, especially since it's so much more budget friendly. But if you're going to be doing photography or videography professionally for clients, or if you are a full-time content creator, I think it's absolutely worth it to get a full frame camera. Hopefully you guys now know which sensor to go with, and if you are still not sure, make sure to comment down below and I will try my best to help you out. Also keep in mind that there are quite a few other sensor sizes as well that are smaller and larger than APS-C and full frame sensors, but these are the two that are the most talked about. But let's go ahead and check out some of the different cameras Sony has and who they are for, because it can get very confusing if you don't have somebody to break it all down for you. I'm going to share with you guys a couple different Sony E-mount cameras in each category, including the general purpose cameras, the best ones for video, and the best ones for photos. Taking a look at the general purpose cameras, the Sony A7IV is their most recent APS-C sensor camera. It comes in at $1,399 for just the body, and in my opinion, this is the best general purpose Sony APS-C camera that you can get right now. Of course, you can check out the older models like the A6600 and the A6400 if you want to find one for a bit cheaper. Now, if you are wanting a general purpose full frame camera, Sony has quite a few options, including the Sony A7IV, which I personally got. There's the Sony A7R5 and the new Sony A7C2. The A7C2 is the cheapest among the three, coming in at $2,198 for the camera body, and it is actually the newest as well. The design is a bit more compact, which makes it a great full frame camera for traveling, and it has more advanced autofocus than the A7IV because it is slightly newer. Keep in mind that the more compact body only allows one SD card slot, and the A7IV has multiple slots because it's larger. Plus, the larger body in the A7IV does allow for slightly longer record times because it's not going to overheat quite as easily. And I know for myself, with these lights on in the studio, my cameras tend to overheat a lot. Now, the A7R5 comes in at $3,898, which is definitely the most expensive out of the three. And the higher price comes mostly from its 60.2 megapixel sensor, whereas with the Sony A7IV and A7C2, they only have 33 megapixels. This means the A7R5 can shoot in 8K resolution, up to 24 frames per second, and the other two cameras can't even shoot in 8K at all. Now let's go ahead and talk about the cameras that I would recommend if you're just going to be filming videos and you aren't worried about taking any photos. The Sony FX30 is from their cinema line that's meant for shooting videos, and it comes in at $1,598 right now. This camera does have the smaller APS-C sensor, so it is more affordable than the other cameras that I'll mention in a second. And because it's meant for shooting video, the FX30 actually has a built-in fan, which means you'll have no worries shooting for long periods of time, and it has 2 memory card slots as well. The Sony ZV-E1 is a popular camera for vlogging, especially if you're going to be traveling a lot, and it comes in at $2,198. This camera actually has a full frame sensor, which will give you better footage in low lighting, and it has an incredible autofocus and tracking, which is a must for vlogging. This camera can only shoot 12 megapixel stills, which is why it isn't recommended for photos, but it still can shoot 4K video footage in 30 frames per second. The last camera that I want to talk about in the video category is the Sony FX3. This thing is an absolute beast, and it looks very similar to the FX30, but this is a full frame camera. It comes in at $3,898, which I know is very pricey, but I would recommend this camera for anyone who does videography for clients professionally, or it is great if you're shooting a long podcast because of the built-in fan that prevents overheating. Because it is a full frame camera, it will allow you to shoot in more lighting conditions than the cheaper FX30, and it can shoot 4K in 120 frames per second, which means you can get crispy 4K slow motion shots, which is absolutely incredible. Now, the most recommended cameras for taking photos of wildlife or pro sports is the Sony A1 and the Sony A9 II. Sony will actually be releasing the new A9 III pretty soon here, so you probably don't want to go ahead and buy the A9 II right now, but these cameras are definitely meant for professional use. So if you are a sports or wildlife photography that takes photos professionally, then and only then would you might consider one of these cameras, because they are very pricey. The new Sony A9 will be $6,000 and the Sony A1 is currently $6,500. I don't have time to talk about these cameras in depth, but the reason they are the best Sony E-mount cameras for photography is because of their high megapixel sensors, and they have some of the fastest burst speeds. These cameras are definitely not meant for everybody, so unless you have a lot more experience than me, I would not recommend getting one of these models. So you're probably wondering, what camera should I get? Well, if I were to start over as a complete beginner, I probably would pick up the Sony A7IV. It is still a bit pricey at $1,398 for just the camera body, but it will allow you to shoot 4K video footage that looks way better than your iPhone and take great photos as well. It can pretty much do everything you need it to, and it will allow you to learn a lot and grow with the camera for a while before you decide you'll need to upgrade. Now, if you already have some experience and you're wanting a compact full frame camera that's going to shoot incredible photos and videos, I recommend checking out the Sony A7C II. With the price of $2,198, it's pretty much just a slightly smaller version of the Sony A7 IV, but it has some more advanced autofocus features. If you're not worried about the size of the camera and you would rather have more card slots, an HDMI port, longer record time with less overheating, then the Sony A7 IV is $100 more at $2,298. These were the two cameras that I was trying to decide between not too long ago, and I ended up going with the Sony A7 IV because I wanted the extra card slots, the better viewfinder, and the larger body. If you were looking for a camera just strictly for video, definitely check out the Sony Cinema line, including the FX3 and the FX30, as those will allow you to film long podcasts and videos without your camera overheating. If you're just going to be vlogging though, the Sony ZV-E1 is a great option as well. I personally think most photographers that are just taking portraits and most people filming content on YouTube and social media would be extremely happy with the Sony A7 IV, which is the main reason I got it. It has been in the market for a few years now, but I don't think the Sony A7 V will be released for another year or two, which makes the A7 IV still a great camera to get. Of course, there is a ton of details I'm not talking about with these cameras, so make sure to do your own research, but hopefully this video helped you guys get a start to what would be the best option for yourself. If you guys want to check out any of these cameras, I will link all of them down in the description below this video for the most updated prices, so you can go ahead and compare them and you'll be able to find them easier that way. Overall, I have absolutely loved my Sony A7 IV, and I am currently filming this video on my A7 IV, and I love how versatile it is, being able to take incredible videos and photos as well. If you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure to give it a thumbs up, as it helps my channel way more than you'd think. Also, make sure to subscribe if you want to see my future content. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and I will see you in the next one. Peace!